This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 78. Welcome to the 78th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, then you already know just how passionate I am about connecting you with the tools and information that you need to improve your menstrual cycle health and your fertility. And that's the reason why I started the podcast in the first place, because I strongly believe that every woman has the right to know exactly how her body and her fertility works. And I feel so privileged to be able to share my passion for body literacy and fertility awareness with you every single week. You only have to listen to a few episodes of the show to gather that fertility awareness is so much more than just birth control or trying to get pregnant, because it truly gives you a window into your own health and your fertility. And so if you've recently discovered fertility awareness, but you're not feeling so confident about using the method for birth control just yet, or if you've been charting for a while and your cycles are kind of all over the place and you're having trouble deciphering what's happening with your mucus or what your cervix is doing, or even if you're having some kind of random bleeding and you're not sure what it means, I can help with that. I absolutely love helping women to connect with their cycles, and I can't wait to delve in with you and help you to bring your cycles back to health. So if you'd like to work with me, you can actually set up a free 15-minute consultation by heading over to fertilityfriday.com/coaching, or you can just click the work with me button when you head over to my website. And I would also like to invite you to sign up for the Fertility Friday newsletter. So head over to fertilityfriday.com/ebook, and as a gift to you, you'll receive a free copy of my new ebook where I reveal what to expect when coming off hormonal contraceptives, and I share 5 steps to restoring healthy menstrual cycles post-pill. If you've recently ditched the pill, my ebook gives you some insight as to why your period may not have just bounced back the second you stop taking the hormones. And it also provides a bit of a roadmap to start bringing your cycles back to health. And in today's show, I'm very excited to welcome my guests, Madeline Shaw and Suzanne Siemens. If you haven't heard of Lunapads, then I think you must be living under a rock. I would have to say, because Madeline and Suzanne are the co-founders of Lunapads. And Lunapads are, for those of you that don't know, reusable cloth menstrual products that keep the disposable products out of the landfills. And there's a ton of health benefits that I can't wait to get into today. And also Madeline and Suzanne are the co-founders of Pads for Girls and One for Her. These are projects that provide sustainable hygiene supplies to girls in developing nations and actually help these girls to attend school. So I can't wait to talk a little bit about the work that you do internationally. So in today's show, we'll be getting into Lunapads and why we should be considering natural menstrual products, why that's even important to consider. So without further ado, welcome to the show, ladies.
Thanks, Lisa. It's really, really special of you to have us. We're really excited.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. So I'd love to give you both an opportunity to tell us about how you started Lunapads, how you met, and how this amazing business partnership began.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll start because I guess technically things got rolling a bit with me on my own in the early 90s. So I was in my mid-20s and menstruating and using tampons, and I'd just gone off the hormonal birth control, which you have so much to say about, Lisa, having been on the pill for 10 years. So it was kind of this perfect storm of going off the pill and experiencing my period, like the full-on thing and the cycle for the first time in my life. And it was so interesting. So I started to have heavier periods. I was using OB tampons at the time because they seemed like the most environmentally responsible choice that I could find at the time. But I was having problems. What would happen to me more or less every month is within 24 hours of the onset of my period, I would come down with a bladder infection.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so bummer, right? And
yeah.
and I'm like, okay, so when it happens often enough, you got to it's not me. Like I know how to take care of my body. I'm a healthy person. Had it checked out by a doctor, and I actually happened to read an article in a periodical in the United States at the time called Garbage, called The Truth About Tampons, and it really struck me. I was like, wow, I had no idea that there was anything unsanitary and unhygienic going on with those products at all, because they just seemed like this kind of ubiquitous, necessary part of life that you just kind of use, and then it went away, and then you were done. And it really struck me to kind of connect the dot, literally, that my body was telling me that it was reacting to these chemicals that it didn't want to have inside it. And so I stopped using tampons. At the time, I was planning to become, in fact, was working as a fashion designer and pretty handy with a needle and thread, and just love that. And I decided to make washable pads that I could use because I didn't want to use disposable pads, because I'd never used disposable pads because they seemed uncomfortable and sweaty and wasteful and bulky. And, I don't have a hugely heavy period in any case. So it wasn't like, my needs were not dramatic, but something had to happen. And so through kind of all of that process, it really revolutionized my consciousness around not just my periods. It started with my periods, but really kind of revolutionized my consciousness around my whole fertility cycle. Mm-hmm. And I just realized, I wept, honestly, that the previous 10 years in living on this earth in a female body, I had kind of shut the whole thing down. Mm-hmm. It was like between pills and tampons and whatever, Midol, whatever, you're done. You're not really experiencing, you're not even ovulating, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I came to consciousness in my mid-20s and I started making these products, I was like, this is a cool idea. Like, I was definitely dialed in as a feminist and wanted to sort of share this experience I'd had with other women. And that's when I started the business. And then fortunately, because I'm not an inherently skilled business person, within a few years, at that time, I do know my way around a little bit now. And, and so we're getting into the end of the 90s, and I closed my store and decided to devote myself full time to marketing Lunapads. And that is when I met Suzanne. So that was what really made it possible for me to do that, because, well, why don't you tell your story and then we'll find out what happened after that.
Okay. So just before I met Madeline, I was working really, really hard in a corporate career that was intense in terms of hours and stress and pressure. And I happened to be trying very hard to have a baby. Speaking of fertility. Mm-hmm. And I was in my early 30s and said, the clock is ticking. Let's try and have a baby. And I did get pregnant, but at around 18 weeks, I went to the doctor and there was no heartbeat. And so long story short, the fetus wasn't viable. And so that was the end of that particular pregnancy. And I made a really, really big decision at that point in time to say, you know what, like, my life is not balanced and I need to take better care of my health, and I think I need to find a new career. So Madeline and I happened to be thrust together serendipitously in a leadership course that we both were taking. And when I saw Madeline, I knew who she was as a person. She had really strong values that resonated with me. And she happened to share with me her business plan. And I read it and I said, yeah, you need some help. You need financing. You need a numbers person. And I happen to be actually really good at that stuff. So why don't I help you? And she was also looking for a business partner. She was looking for investors. And I said, yeah, I can help you do that too. Well, let's go find them. And I guess in the course of looking at her business plan and helping her assess the future of Lunapads, I said, you know what, I'm in.
Wow.
So I joined her as her co-founder, and we put our heads together, built the business plan, found another investor, found money from the bank to get a loan, and then grew the business from there. And here we are 16 years later. Long story, very short. And we've grown the business to where it is today.
That is incredible.
And she had 2 kids. She said she's got 2 teenage boys now.
So I did quit my job, and I joined her with both feet. And had 2 boys, one in hospital. And after that hospital experience, I said, I'm having a home birth next time. And it took 4 years to get pregnant again, so it wasn't easy. But I learned so much about my fertility, and I think that it's really... I wish you were around when I had my kids 15 years ago, because I was clueless and I didn't know what I was doing, and I was frustrated, and I was seeing fertility specialists and it wasn't really helping, and I just started to do reading and figured out what it took to have a healthy pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. That's an amazing story. I really love hearing how people find their way into what they're doing because it's fascinating, and obviously not an accident that the two of you were in that same space at the same time. So it was obviously meant to be. I'd love to delve into Lunapads. For the listeners who are not familiar with Lunapads, maybe they haven't really heard of them, or maybe they've kind of heard of, maybe the Diva cup or the menstrual cup seem to be really catching on these days. But for the listeners who aren't really sure about that whole scene, what are some of the reasons why we should be concerned about what's in our tampons and pads?
Oh my gosh. Well, where to start on that one? The two main sort of sources of concern are around just the ingredients in those products and what impact they may have by being, exposed, repeated contact, whether internally or just, intralabially or, against your vulva, whatever. Like what are those chemicals and what impact does that have on the body? Thing number one, and then thing number two is the environment. And holy smokes, because we've all got to live in this world. And, the two issues to me sort of overlap because, health and the environment are not separate at all. They're totally intimately connected. And I know for me, I think because this whole thing started because I had a health issue, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what was going on were two things. One were just the overall depletion of vaginal moisture. Mm-hmm. And I still remember, honestly, 23 years later, I still remember hating the feeling of taking out a tampon, on day 4 of my period. Like there was just nothing in there anymore. It was gone. And just feeling so gross about that. And so I think that can have we need that natural lubrication that our body provides us with for a whole bunch of reasons. And when you take it away, it disrupts the vaginal pH level. Bits of, especially tampons, they can leave fibers embedded in the vaginal wall. And with the rest of it, there are a million chemicals in there. It is not largely or widely studied, or you can't with any great certainty say there is this residue of dioxin and it's carcinogenic and no. Like all of that stuff is to an extent speculative. Like there have been absolutely relationships demonstrated between contact dermatitis and disposable menstrual pads for sure. But the rest of it is a big murky gray area. And we are big fans of the organization Women's Voices for the Earth because it feels to us like they are doing the most complete job. Like they are taking these products to a lab and finding out what's in them because of course the ingredients aren't just disclosed in the boxes. Mm-hmm. So we're not allowed to know what we're putting in our bodies. We're just supposed to spend our money and use them. And so I would start there. But I mean, things like, obviously, if you're going to use disposables, don't get anything with perfume or deodorant or any of that garbage. Only buy, organic cotton products, I would suggest. And what do you want to say?
The other thing I would add, Lisa, is that what's evolved over time is that the disposable pads have gotten thinner and more technical over time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the reason they have gotten that way is because there has been new technology to infuse in these pads these super absorbent polymers, mm-hmm. and they're in diapers as well. And they're just really not natural ingredients whatsoever.
Whatever the opposite of natural is, they're that.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And so Women's Voices for the Earth, as Madeline mentioned, they've done a study and they've actually listed what's in disposable pads, and it's the same ingredients that is in like tires and plastics and just some really not nice things that you would want against your body. So while we don't lead with scaring people about what's in disposables, we do say choose something that's good for you and healthy for you. And that's why a lot of people choose Lunapads. And then to top it off, they last for 5 years or more. So you're saving a lot of money and garbage.
Well, I remember when I first discovered the world of reusable menstrual products, it was like probably my second year of university or something. And I went to this talk, women's centers on university campuses are so awesome. But I remember them talking about some of the things that you talked about with the fibers. You don't think of a menstrual pad or a tampon as a piece of technology. I really liked when you said it was technical because that's what it is. I mean, can you imagine how much money goes into the engineering of it sounds like I'm being funny to say, can you imagine how much money goes into manufacturing a menstrual pad? But I don't think women realize that who knows how many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars actually go into manufacturing these polymers to make them super absorbent. And I remember one of the examples that they used was like, imagine putting a tampon in your mouth. Like if you, because I mean, you don't think, we got to start thinking about our vaginas. It's internal, and whatever you're putting in your vagina, you should be comfortable putting in your mouth. I mean, that's
it's exactly the same. Like it has very similar properties. And it's funny, every time I make that suggestion to people sometimes just to give them a bit of a reality check, and they're like, ew.
Yeah, and you get the fibers in your mouth, and like it's too drying and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's like a huge part of it. And then also just comfort. I think you're not alone in your experience, Madeline, that you were having kind of chronic infections, or you know what I mean? Like with all the TV and all the advertisements on TV, I think women are made to think that it's normal to just have regular yeast infections or to have like regular bladder infections or whatever the case. And there's never any indication that the two could be linked. So I think that that's really an important thing to know. And maybe you could spend a little bit of time talking about the environmental impact of pads and tampons.
Yeah, for sure. I believe the latest statistic is well over 14 billion disposable pads, tampons, and applicators going into landfills every month. And
it's actually 20 billion if you include the applicators.
Okay.
If you don't include the applicators, it's maybe 14 billion. But
is that annual? That's annual.
Annual. Yeah.
Sorry.
Wow.
But the next statistic I wanted to get to was a happier one, which is thanks to so many Lunapads customers out there using our products, over 2 million disposables are being diverted from landfills. So obviously every month. Okay. So We're not winning the war here yet, but we're definitely making progress. And so, yeah, I mean, also when we think about the pads and the tampons, you got to think about the weird plasticky wrap that they come in, and applicators. What is up with applicators? Oh my God. Come on, ladies. Like, I just still can't get over that. Like it's really prevalent. Like I was just down in the States and looking around in some stores, and it's like most of the tampons have applicators. And I was kind of shocked by that. It's like, are we still living in an era where there's this kind of taboo about touching yourself and your dirty, bleeding vagina? Oh my gosh. So I was thrown by that. And then, of course, you're encouraged to wrap it up in more paper and plastic and toilet paper, and then, you know, off it goes into the landfill. And actually, speaking of this, it's a little bit sideways, but I notice I have a thing about the disposal containers in public washrooms. Some of them here, I don't know about where you are, but some of them here look like bomb disposal units.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like they say things like sealed for your protection and biohazard and all this stuff, and you're like, whoa, like this is just me having my period. Like this is just some mucus and blood and, you know, endometrial lining, and this is not toxic waste, you guys. And so, yeah, all of that is like the solid waste problem is immense. These products do not biodegrade. They take 500 years to biodegrade.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a disposable. That's your always infinity. It's because it takes infinity for it to biodegrade, you guys. Like it's, yeah. So there's, I mean, the whole mythology around this sanitary protection and feminine hygiene, just the language. And I still catch myself saying feminine hygiene products sometimes too. It's just the implication that these products are safe and sanitary and hygienic when they're the total opposite. Like we have been so messed up in our social conditioning around this to believe that this toxic chemical soaked plastic garbage is clean. Like,
do you have an opinion on that, Madeline?
No, I don't know.
Well, I have my own personal, I mean, this would not save the environment, but they managed to have those biohazard boxes in every bathroom. But for some, and every time I've gone to the bathroom, except for those, you know, unfortunate times when there's no toilet paper, there's always toilet paper available, and I've never had to purchase toilet paper. However, every woman menstruates, and for some reason that's not considered to be like a natural bodily function. In my perfect world, menstrual products would actually just be like toilet paper, be available. So I know that doesn't address the environmental issue, but why would a perfectly natural function that every woman has, why would you have to, like, I mean, you don't have to purchase toilet paper. Why is this not the same? But that's its own separate.
Well, yeah, Lisa, what you're touching on is a big topic right now that we are engaged in around the whole notion of menstrual equity and the inequity that menstruators have to finance dealing with a very natural biological function that we can't avoid. And so this whole campaign around removal of so-called tampon tax is a big movement right now happening, and I'm sure you've heard about that. And it's really good to see the conversation being opened up so that people understand that this is an important conversation to move forward and try and eliminate some of the inequity around being a menstruator.
Well, and, you know, Madeline, you touched on a really important point as well, which is, you know, the applicator and just how it can kind of perpetuate this notion that your body is gross and you could fully be a grown woman and have never either looked at your vulva or had any real contact with your vagina, and why that's actually problematic. And taking it a step further, for a woman who's listening and, you know, has always kind of held that belief, like, well, I don't even want to see my menstruation. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to smell it. So why would I want to use a reusable pad? So maybe you could talk a little bit about the benefits and beyond the benefits, the experience, I guess, of the woman who chooses to use a reusable menstrual product.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess one of the things that we've seen time and time again is that the place, like, I always validate whenever somebody says, like, oh, that makes me uncomfortable, or I feel a bit, ugh. And I'm like, yeah, that makes perfect sense, because every single bit of social conditioning that you've ever had around menstruation is you're reacting in a way that's perfectly in line with that. And don't blame and don't judge and don't whatever. Like, this is the world that we're living in, and we're all just trying to do our best to get by, and nobody's perfect. But that said, one of the things we notice is, like, over time, like, we'll have an initial conversation with somebody depending on where they are in their journey and try and address, you know, things like whatever their concerns may be of, like, well, I have super heavy flow and, you know, or I work out a lot, or I'm busy all the time, or I can't afford it, or, you know, whatever conversation somebody wants to have, because it's never just about one thing. Like, there's sort of the squeamishness, but it's like, if you can kind of be patient with that inner person, that and we're doing a lot of work with adolescent girls right now through an event series that we're running, and it's just really interesting because I always think back and I try and imagine the person and ask her about, you know, when she first started her period, or what her parents may or may not have told her, what that experience was like, because in a lot of ways it can be really wounding, and it's not just a practical left brain kind of decision around what they're doing. Like, there's this really powerful story around, well, my mother this, or my sister this, or then, you know, in my case, my brother's friend made fun of me when I started my period, and I punched him. And, you know, not that that's why I started Lunapads or anything. It's like, we all have stories, right? And so, you know, and if some people are concerned, you know, they may have sort of vaguely heard that there's something maybe not awesome about tampons, and be curious. Like, there's a lot of curiosity, and so we just try and be really super friendly and open, and not all convincing and scary and that kind of stuff. And I feel like also we've had so much life experience, the two of us, between, and our staff. It's like, we're all just living in these bodies in this world, and you know, what was it like when you had a baby, or what was, you know, just those life experiences, and just being relatable as another human being who shares this phenomenon of menstruation, and, you know, being open to questions and curiosity. So really trying to take the shame and the judgment out of the conversation, whether somebody is ready to switch to our products or not. Like, it's cool. Like, I'm not interested in ramming anything down somebody's throat. It's like, it's all about personal choice above all else. But people they keep coming back, and then by the time they become customers, they're like, oh, I just wish I'd bought these the first time I heard about them. I was too uptight to do it. And that, you know, that's okay. I wouldn't mind accelerating that a little bit. Maybe I could do something, but we love, I don't know, having conversations.
I mean, a shorter way to say that is I think we've just been socialized to feel like our periods are either shameful or they're annoying and they're a drag. And so the last thing I would want to do is pay more attention and wash my menstrual pads. Like, I just want my period to go away and be done with. And so I think what's more interesting about using cloth pads, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, Lisa, is that the practice of actually being conscious with your period and having to actually care for yourself kind of changes how you think about your period.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the added benefit of switching to Lunapads or switching to the Diva Cup, because you're actually interacting with your body in a way that is taking care of you, as opposed to, oh, it's my period, I want it to go away, and put it in the garbage. So you're just changing the lens in which you're experiencing your body, and that's the benefit.
That's a great way of putting it. And I think when we start thinking about fertility, and we start, for women or people who cycle, who want to get pregnant, and they start going, okay, how does this work? Like, this isn't just about cleaning up something for 5 days. Like, I need to pay attention, right? And that people develop a new respect for their bodies, and also realize that there's wisdom, like in going closer to the experience that includes menstruation. There's this deep, deep body wisdom and self-love and gentleness and appreciation, especially for people who have, tried to conceive, struggled with conception, or had a baby. It's like, it's a miracle, you guys.
It is.
And this is part of it. And so, yeah, I think we are quite violent with our bodies so often, and then introducing something that's just kind of soft and gentle and friendly and not a big deal. And, we washed our kids' diapers, right? Like why do we ascribe this special status of disgustingness to menstrual blood when it's what our menses is, the stuff of life, literally?
Well, and I always say that, there's no human being alive without menstrual blood. I mean, every single human being on this earth was nourished by the endometrial lining until they were born. So, I mean, digest that one for a minute. And I think we're sold this story that our periods are disgusting and gross. But then when you actually, you're sold the story, and then you're sold the products, and the products keep a distance between you and your menstruation, and they kind of prevent you from really understanding it. So the Diva Cup, which I'd love to talk about a little bit more, when I started using the Diva Cup, I was amazed and fascinated to be able to see how much I was bleeding. And that might sound gross to some people, or if they're not comfortable with that, but it's actually not. Like, we're sold the story that it's so gross, but it's actually fascinating, and it's actually not disgusting. And it does allow you to connect to your body, to your femininity in a different way. And I mean, not everyone wants to do that. This isn't necessarily for everybody, but I mean, it should be on the table, just like all the other options that we have for for everything in life. And I think it's really interesting how switching to a more kind of ethical and reusable menstrual product. And one of the things that I loved about learning about Lunapads and the Diva Cup and all the different cups is that it's made for women by women. And so what that means is that if a woman is making a product for other women, she wants it to be comfortable. She wants it to be cute. You know what I mean? Like, all of these things when you put on a Lunapad. So I'll give an example. I just had a baby. I have a 7-month-old and I have a 3-year-old. And both times the thought of putting on like a regular pad after giving birth, it just felt icky. Like, it doesn't feel comfortable at all. So specifically talking about comfort, you're obviously a little bit like sore and raw. And so to be able to put on my Lunapads after that it's like a nice hug or something. It's soft, it's comfortable. So just the practicality of having a product that's made by women for women means that you're having a completely different experience.
Yeah, totally. And actually, that was one of the things that surprised me in the very beginning, because as I mentioned, I was just a dedicated tampon user, because to me, the idea of a pad was like, ugh. But when it was a cloth pad that I made myself in that case, I was like, whoa, this is actually super. This is like sitting in this nice little yoni pillow.
Yeah.
And this feels good. This feels like gentle, and like I'm just taking care of myself in this very non-invasive, gentle, private, self-loving kind of way. And that was really what kind of turned me onto it. And also that I was liberated from walking through the aisles of pink plastic in drugstores. And yeah. So,
well, and I want to add that the postpartum experience was definitely enhanced with using Lunapads, because you are right. You are already sore and raw and feeling kind of like you've been ripped apart a little bit.
Because you kind of were.
Remember my midwives who used Lunapads in two ways. One, when I was going through labor, they had a cold pad and they soaked it in cold water and they put it on my perineum to kind of ease the pain. And then after the birth, they put it in warm water and then put it on my perineum to kind of make it feel nice and soothing. So it's a gift to be able to use something that is actually caring for you and not just, okay, it's a Band-Aid and let's mop it up. So yeah, it's nice to know that we do have customers who come to us for kind of postnatal purposes as well as prenatal purposes, because when you're pregnant, you've got a lot of discharge coming out of you, and so it's like kind of nasty to use an everyday panty liner and throw it away. And why not wear our underwear or wear a nice cloth panty liner instead?
Well, and the environmental aspect, we've touched on it a few times, is a big one for me, because it's only when you really kind of get conscious about your period and you really think about, you're menstruating throughout your whole life. And every month you're using these products and they're just one-time use and then you're throwing them away. I mean, that's a huge environmental impact, but I mean, it's also a financial impact. And I love walking right past the menstrual products aisle. Like I can't remember the last time that I used that. So maybe you could talk a little bit about kind of even just the financial aspect of choosing a reusable product.
Totally.
Yeah, well, I mean, a single menstruator is going to use at least about 11,000 pads in her lifetime. That's a lot of money. And typically we've suggested that every Lunapad will replace 120 disposables. So that in of itself is saving you money right there and then. And I mean, I don't even know what it's like to throw pads away in the garbage anymore. And, in the odd case that you've caught yourself off guard and you're like, it's come too soon. You have to go to the drugstore. Yeah, it's like, this seems too weird. But you save thousands of dollars, because if you think about spending 11,000 pads and tampons in your lifetime, like what does that add up to if you're buying it for 50 cents a piece or $1 a piece? Like that's a lot of change.
Plus tax, depending on where you live in the United States. I like to, one of the things I like to do, because I'm actually going into my 24th year of using nothing but reusables. And I calculated the number of periods I've had in my life, not long ago. It's like 368 or something. And anyways, I love the idea of like just buying yourself a little treat every month, like buying yourself, a bunch of flowers or just something that's for you, and assuming that you have the income that this makes sense for you to make this choice and the luxury of being able to make this choice. So, take your $8 you would have spent on a box of tampons and buy yourself a bunch of flowers instead to honor yourself, instead of buying some, plastic chemical soaked garbage that goes in the landfill, doesn't biodegrade for 500 years. Right? What would anybody list? Like, what would you rather do, right? Like, would you, or save it up for a few minutes and get yourself a nice massage or a pedicure or just something that feels special to you, or donate it to charity. And actually that starts bringing up the Pads for Girls stuff and the AMHM issue in the Global South. And it's like we can vote with our dollars. We have more choice than we realize in so many different ways. And this is a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to talk about the Diva Cup as well, because the Diva Cup has been my go-to for the last 15 years or something. I bought the Keeper before there was the Diva Cup. So
awesome.
Throwback. But so maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I know that it can be a bit intimidating because of the way it looks. It doesn't look like a tampon. It's bigger than a tampon. And if any of you have ever taken a look or considered using it, how does it get in there? How does it work? And is it effective? And is it comfortable? So I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about all those things.
Totally. And, we had the Keeper and sold it for a while as well. And I found that I reacted to the rubber in it. And then finally came around to cups with the Diva Cup, which is made of silicone. And Yeah, I mean,
Well, first of all, it's a great business. It's a women-owned business based in Ontario,
mhm.
Canada.
Mother-daughter.
And they developed the product because they were previously distributors of the Keeper, and they just wanted to innovate and make it better with medical grade silicone. And for your listeners, it's just a kind of small cup, literally, that can be folded in such a way that it actually is not very big at all. And so once you get the fold right, you insert it and it kind of opens up gently inside your vagina, and it's held in place with the muscles of your vagina. And it's not meant to be worn really high like a cervical cap, so it just rests low. And it feels like the same way a tampon feels. Once it's in there, you don't notice it at all. But there's a learning curve, and I don't push the Diva Cup to users who aren't really comfortable using tampons. But if you're a tampon user, it's just a very quick learning curve. And there's techniques for removing it without making a big mess, and there's techniques for using it in a public washroom. And I just noticed that Diva Cup retweeted a YouTube video that Madeline and I produced of me demonstrating how to change a Diva Cup in a public washroom.
Nice. I have
And
to
it's
check
been
that out.
viewed 43,000 times
That's so
now.
good.
So yeah, it's been useful for people to watch the video and go, yeah, I can handle this. Like sometimes I need to change my cup when I'm out, and like we've been to trade shows, Madeline and I, where you're standing for 12 hours and it's like, no, I need to change my cup and empty it. And so there's a learning curve, but once you gain the confidence of it, it's a fantastic
so
product.
much better because it's not drying you out the way tampons do. And I talked a little bit earlier about just the kind of pain and disruption of vaginal dryness caused by tampon use. And so the Diva Cup is catching the menstrual flow in a sort of ambient kind of a way, but it's not absorbing it. It's not sucking it out of you. So it's not removing any of your natural vaginal moisture. And the other thing I think is great about it is that you can leave it in, depending on your flow, obviously, but you can safely leave it in for far longer than a tampon. So a tampon, I think everybody knows, you should be changing that every few hours. And the Diva Cup, assuming that you're not having really heavy flow, you can leave in safely for up to 12 hours. And that, to me, I mean, what does that tell you about what's in tampons? Hello, even when the manufacturers are like, get that thing out of you after 8 hours at the maximum. So Diva Cup is great. I find it if I start my period in the morning and I just have a busy day kind of stacked up, or I'm doing something sporty like going skiing or hiking or something like that, and then just pop it in. For me, I can wear it for the whole day without overflowing it. And so it's just the Diva Cup's a very practical product. Like it doesn't, I find, have the same kind of gentle, like Lunapads are pretty. They have unicorns on them and little foxes and all this cool stuff. So it's not quite as aesthetically pleasing. The Diva Cup, it definitely feels much more like a medical device, but it is very efficacious. It's comfortable. It's safe. Zero waste. As Suzanne said, tampon users, give it a try, and we can almost guarantee you won't look back.
Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine that after a woman becomes comfortable with the Diva Cup, because you just can't really imagine going back to tampons because it's so much more comfortable. Once you get past the learning curve, it's so much more comfortable. And what you said about being able to wear it for a long time. So whether you have a really light flow, it makes it super convenient if you have a super light flow, or if you have a heavy flow, you might find that you don't have to change as quickly, because that's one of the things that I found, because I'm on the other end. I had a heavier flow for all those years, but it was so much better than with tampons having to change so frequently. So there's so many benefits of reusable products. It's really I'm loving that I get to have a conversation with the developers of this testing process. So fun.
So, just one more thing to your point about the Diva Cup. We talked about this learning curve thing, and it made me think back to earlier in the conversation when we were thinking about tampon applicators and how stupid they are and how they create this barrier between you and touching yourself, because God forbid. And with the Diva Cup, it's opposite. Like, you need to get in there and good. Awesome, and while you're at it, check where your cervix is at, and while you're at it, whatever. Like, there's so much about that, that's opposite to tampon philosophy of don't touch, make it go away. And so there's a lot of wisdom in doing that, and around just self-acceptance. Like, there's information about what your body's doing, but then there's just the being okayness with touching it and being curious about it. Like you said something earlier that reminded me of what I like to do when I empty my Diva cup is I empty it into a toilet bowl, but I always notice it's almost like a lava lamp. Like it makes these really beautiful patterns, like the blood, and it kind of goops around and changes shape and whatever. And some people will think I'm crazy, but I actually find it really interesting. And it's just like looking at it and feeling curious about it. And there's some people making really cool art with it and patterns and just seeing what happens. And because really, like, it goes back to that miracle thing. Like, let's be curious.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, absolutely. And one of the things that I found really interesting as well when I started to use the Diva cup is that you see, I just made myself laugh in my head, but you see what it is. It's not blue liquid. That's what it is that made me laugh in my head. It's not water with like dye. So you see that the texture, you know, it can be thinner, it can be thicker. There can be a little bit of tissue in there. And it really highlights why tampons are so annoying.
Well, and I just want to add finally around tampons and the Diva cup is the difference is that the Diva cup is collecting your blood in medical grade silicone. And so there is virtually little to no risk of toxic shock syndrome because all it's doing is collecting your blood. There's no place for the bacteria to fester and grow. Whereas tampons, that's why there's that need to replace them regularly because tampons can cause toxic shock syndrome, and that's why there's warnings on the boxes because it's there, the cotton is there to absorb and be a place for bacteria to grow. So it just makes so much more sense from a health perspective as well as convenience and saving money, and you know, it's the best reason.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and we talked, I'll just throw in one other point that I found interesting because we talked about how there's this whole manufacturing process that really creates this technology to be super absorbent. But when you see your actual period, and you might even be surprised at how little blood you have, right? Then you kind of wonder, like, what is it absorbing? And Madeline, it's absorbing your vaginal fluids. That's what it's absorbing because it's you have such little blood, really. You could put a tampon in a cup of water. So I would suggest if you have any tampons in your house and you're feeling geeky and sciencey, if you want to do this, but put the tampon in the cup of water and see how much it absorbs. Like, but it would never really absorb that much blood in your body because it doesn't have as much room to expand. It would be soaking well. Like, it just the development of this product doesn't really address what a woman's actually experiencing. And so that goes back to my point about a product for women by women and just how much more thoughtful this product is to actually address what it is that is menstruation. So
totally. And while you're at it, if you're out there dipping a tampon in a glass of water, lift out the tampon when it's saturated and notice all the junk that is left over, all the fibers that are left over in the water. Yes, this too could end up inside your body.
Yeah.
No thanks.
It's cloudy.
No thanks.
Yeah, ew. So I guess shifting directions a little bit, I would love to hear about the projects that you're doing internationally and the impact that has on girls and even their ability to go to school and those types of things.
Sure, totally. Do you want to start at the beginning
Sure.
of the story?
Okay, well,
it's another long story.
Yeah, I would say almost 15 years ago, yes, maybe over 15 years ago, we were sent a letter from snail mail.
A real letter.
Back when internet was not a big deal. And this woman from Zimbabwe was working there, and actually she was living there as well, and asked us to think about the condition that girls and women experienced in Zimbabwe, where when they got their period, they either couldn't afford to purchase sanitary products, or they simply weren't accessible or available because there's no drugstore around the corner where you can go buy them. And so she reached out to us and asked us if we would make a donation of our pads to support her. And we weren't even sure the pads would actually get there because the mail back then was not very reliable, and it never maybe even crossed the border reliably. But we did what we could, and then we just became more aware by more and more people writing to us, and journalists started writing about the issue. And essentially, if you can just imagine, a girl when she gets her period, she has no supplies, but she's going to school, and she doesn't want to soil her school uniform. And most of these girls, actually, we learned, don't even own a pair of underwear. It's not necessarily customary for girls to even wear underwear. And so they were just unable to deal with their period. And so their only recourse, and actually I'll also add that a lot of schools don't even have latrines for the girls. So their recourse is to simply stay home. And so they're staying home for a couple of days a month, up to a week. And then you can imagine that they're falling behind in school. And as they fall behind, then they're not doing well. And simply their parents say, you know what, why don't you just drop out of school? And school's expensive as well. So they're dropping out of school. And as you can imagine, then they are then just being married off. And so you've got girls getting married as young adolescents or teenagers, getting pregnant, and then dealing with the complications of pregnancy. And one statistic that we're aware of is the number one cause of death of a girl's age is 13, I think, to 18 in the world, and not just in the developing world, but in the world in total, is complications due to childbirth. Yeah. That's the number one cause of death.
Yes, it is.
And then women can't work either.
Yeah.
So we developed a program called Pads for Girls, and we just developed a practice of donating what we could, with providing organizations who requested them Lunapads. And then that evolved in, I think it was 2008, we were contacted by a couple of people who received one of those donations. They were in Uganda. And they wrote to us by email and said, we have Lunapads in our hands. We can't believe what a gift this is. We really need these here in the village that we're working in Uganda. And could we please copy these Lunapads products and make them here in Uganda? And we looked at each other and just went, well, we're certainly not planning on expanding our business in Uganda. And it's a great idea. We couldn't possibly meet all the demand of Lunapads in Uganda. So go ahead, make them, and you have our blessing, and we'll help you in whatever way, whether it's providing you patterns or product knowledge or, you know, what's going on.
Financial planning advice.
Sure. And so we said, bless you, go ahead and do it. And not really knowing how it would end up, but, you know, we kept in touch. We talked to them over the phone, over Skype. And over time, they grew and grew. And so in 2012, they said, you know what, you guys really need to come see what we've done. So in 2012, we traveled to Uganda and we visited their factory, and they had 25 employees. So they were creating local employment.
Wow.
And it was a great solution because we no longer had to make Lunapads and mail them halfway around the world in village. Like, it was a for-profit company making them. So I remember the day that we walked into the factory, and Madeline broke into tears because she was seeing Lunapads being made on the other side of the world by these local tailors. And it was just a wonderful experience to see it happen.
There's a video of it, and when we went there and meeting their staff and just seeing, they even sat me down at a sewing machine and got me to sew some and everything. And it was really moving. Like, it was really one of the most remarkable experiences we've ever had, I would say, in business in general. And it's like, you know, it says a lot. Like, it may sound sort of accidental and everything, but everything that we do is from a very deep place of intention around wanting to make the world a better place. Like, it really is. And using our business to kind of serve that. But then you see it cropping up in these really unexpected ways, and you're like, wow, that's so cool. And, you know, it just sort of defies common business wisdom, which would have said, well, you should have a contract, and, you know, that's your intellectual, you know, just start doing things by letting go of the concept. And, you know, just, it makes so much more sense for them to be doing it there and being self-sufficient. So we've become pretty interested watchers in this whole South movement, you know, spanning from, when we came back from Uganda, we started a sort of a Tom Shoe style 1-for-1, which is one for her, program that we're actually even making. Yeah, we are absolutely iterating and just always looking sort of to try new and better ways of addressing needs that empower others, like empower the end user the most and in the most sustainable way, as opposed to kind of a, you know, Western imperial, like, oh, this is, you know, it's how we do it in Canada. So you ladies in Malawi, let me tell you, it's like, no. And we've seen some, like, we've share patterns, and then they'll make their own version of the products and make them out of all kinds of stuff that they have locally. And like, innovate on their own, right? And then create their own solutions that, provide employment and all this kind of stuff into the bargain. So it's really cool. We're not quite ready to announce what we're doing next with that, but even right now we were moving through thousands of dollars worth of donated funds from our customers to supply Pads, and also another program that we're part of called Transformation Textiles. And they're in Egypt, where they take leftover fabric from mass scale garment production and make the waste fabric, the offcuts, into work sort of thing. And it's so cool. So not only are they providing a sustainable solution for very low cost, but they're actually taking leftover fabric that would otherwise be waste and making it into something useful. How cool is that?
That is amazing. And what an amazing kind of result of what you're doing. I'm guessing that when you founded the company, you didn't anticipate that you'd have this type of worldwide global impact. And I think one of the things we take for granted here, I mean, I do the podcast, I talk about all the different options that we have. How fortunate are we to have these options? At the end of the day, like, as much as I'm bashing tampons and pads, we have the ability to go to the store and buy them. And then we also have the ability to choose not to because we don't like them. And this is something that we have to keep in mind, because I think that the growing awareness of the fact that if a girl doesn't have access to menstrual products, it means she doesn't go to school. I mean, that's a huge, huge reality that it's amazing that you're a part of you're a part of that global movement to help girls just get through school because they don't even have washrooms for them that they can change their pads and they don't even have pads to change.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's a very, very interesting thing. And we're just always having different conversations about it and noodling it around and seeing what, and we still, like, anyways, we're not done yet. Like, it's so funny. We're still trying to, if we had more time, I think, then we would probably do more with that. But we always talk about going back to Uganda and different things. And anyways, it's cool. We're having a good time.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. So before we kind of start wrapping up and getting to the final questions, is there anything that kind of stands out that you really want the listeners to know, just given the conversation that we've had today?
Just not to be scared of trying reusable menstrual products. Like, they will surprise you, like, really. And we can pretty much guarantee that you'll like them way better than disposables. And just the comfort piece that you were pointing to, Lisa, at the most simple level, in addition to getting a whole lot of toxic stuff out of your sacred, beautiful temple. We say no tampons in the temple here at Lunapads. And just give it a spin. And you know what, if people don't like the products, like, we guarantee them, we'll try different solutions. And if somebody's not happy, that's okay too. Like, we can figure that out as well. And so just really encourage anybody who's curious to head over to lunapads.com. And if they have questions, we have live chat going. We've got videos. We just love to talk to customers. We're active in all the social media channels. And just kind of take a deep breath and go for it, because you'll be surprised.
Mm-hmm. Well, so a few final questions for today then. Although we didn't spend a lot of time talking about fertility, I would love to know what you would say the biggest myth about fertility is that you'd like to see corrected.
Myth.
Oh. I don't know. I'm not a good one to talk to. My pregnancy was unplanned, and while I was using a barrier method of birth control. So I just started reading Take Charge of Your Fertility, and I would encourage people to read that book.
That's a great book.
Yeah.
I think that the fertility apps that you have on your phone are pretty amazing as well, and that when I was trying to get pregnant, there was that scary statistic that 1 out of every 3 couples is going to have a hard time conceiving. And I understand that from the perspective of, if you're just assuming that, you just try and it doesn't happen, there's something wrong. Like, if you really get in touch with your body and you figure out when you're truly ovulating and whether or not you are ovulating, like, I think that it's not as daunting as it can be portrayed as. So maybe that's a myth, and that there are some really great resources out there, probably everything on your website.
Yeah, exactly. Fertility Friday. Hello.
Yeah. and that it needs to be a lonely experience, because I think that women don't really share their fertility challenges because there's also, again, a sense of shame around that. And I felt that shame when I had my miscarriages or when I noticed that my friends were having babies and I was left behind. And, there's a group of people that can support you and you don't have to feel alone. So that's probably a myth as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if there's a woman who's listening and she's currently on the pill, she's taking in all this information, she knows she doesn't want to get pregnant now. She's nervous to get off the pill, but she is thinking about pregnancy within the next couple of years. What, if anything, would you want her to know?
Oh, just that there are some really great non-hormonal birth control methods out there. And I know that you are a practitioner of the Justice method. And to really pay attention, like knowledge is power, and the fewer synthetic hormones you have running around in your body, the sooner the better, and you get to know your cycle and you engage your partner in that process, and really almost like a very loving science project. Like this is totally doable, and like obviously there's no 100% perfect solutions, but also, I don't get what's really so bad about tampons, or not tampons, sorry. I get what's so bad about them. I was going to say condoms, actually. Like, and I think that the more you get to know your body, the easier time that you're going to have with the information that you need to conceive when that comes around, but also to prevent pregnancy when you're not ready.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are fantastic words to end on. Thank you both so much for being here today. I'm really happy that we had a chance to have this conversation, and I think it's really going to be an interesting interview for all the listeners to listen to. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. That was really fun, and just thank you for what you're doing. It's super valuable, and don't stop, and we're happy to support you anytime.
Well, thank you. And I know you mentioned the website, but just one more time for the listeners. So if you've been inspired by the conversation and you want to learn a little bit more about what Lunapads is, the company, the products, where can they go?
Lunapads.com.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/78. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please do look for it on iTunes and leave a 5-star review so that more people can find it. And make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com to join my email list. And if you have an idea for a podcast episode or a guest suggestion, send me an email at info@fertilityfriday.com. And remember, you don't have to figure it all out yourself. I absolutely love helping women to connect with their cycles, and I can't wait to delve in with you and help you to bring your cycles back to health. So if you'd like to work with me, head over to fertilityfriday.com/coaching, or just click on the Work With Me button on my website to set up your free 15-minute consultation. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I appreciate all of you for taking the time to tune into the podcast and let me be part of your day and taking me along with you, whether you're, taking the dog for a walk or driving to work. And so thanks again. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.